time.
As a comic nerd, I really loved watching the Marvel's Thor movies. It might not be super accurate compared to the Old Norse origin, but it absolutely picks up some of the Old Norse gods' traits, both the hammer, the friendship with Loki, and his temper. Thor, or Thor as I call him in modern Swedish, probably ends up in the top 4 of the most known gods from the Viking Age. He is, at least on the surface, also one of the less complicated gods and beings in the Old Norse religion. He is the son of Odin, strong and so manly that not even women's clothes can hide this manliness. He rides over the sky in his chariot drawn by 2 goats, Tangnost and Tangrisner, hunting for trolls and giants with his hammer Mjölnir, the hammer that always returns to his hand after it has been thrown and that will create flashes and thunder when it is used. Thor is one of the most popular gods to be worshipped by the Old Norse people. He is one of the gods along with Odin and Frey that Adam of Bremen mentioned as the most important gods worshipped in Uppsala. And this was not the only place where he had cult places, which we can see if we look into the old names of places around Scandinavia. There is a long list of names that include the name Thor and some kind of word that suggests that this was a place of worship all over Scandinavia in both Denmark, Sweden, Norway and Iceland. We can also see a pretty large amount of small pendants and little statues of a man holding what is probably a hammer, and we find these in Viking graves, again all over Scandinavia. His connections to flashes and thunderstorms are also reflected in the language. People have, throughout the history, often referred to thunderstorms by saying something along with Thor is out riding again or Thor is hunting for trolls again. That Thor is perceived as a pretty uncomplicated character in the Old Norse religion is probably because he was one of the more popular among the storytellers and has a lot of hero stories told about him. Folktale hero stories usually doesn't come with a complicated hero, and they are much more black and white than most mythology is. In the stories, Thor travels around in different parts of the world, usually together with Loki, and there isn't much mystery needed around Thor himself. He is a pretty straight-up hero, strong, manly, generally a good guy, but with a temper that sometimes puts him in trouble. But, as with most all Norse religion, if you start to scratch on the surface, you will find layers. Perhaps not as many layers as Odin or Freya, but if you go away from the more folktale version of his adventure and look into the mythology, Thor isn't as simple as one is fooled to believe. He has an important place in the Old Norse universe where he serves as the upholder of the order and the fighter of chaos. He is the strongest god, the one that always fights back the giants and trolls, beings that represent chaos and the chaos threat against Asgard and Midgard. He also has a place as a fertility god, where he's named Aku Thor, where Aku means both driving and traveling in Old Norse, puts him as one responsible for bringing rain to your crops. Other names in the old poems are Vingtor, Loride or Enride, again pointing toward him traveling over the sky. A thing that most people seems to forget is that Valhall is the most known place for us today, but most gods in the Old Norse had their own halls, and all those halls had their own name and was probably considered at least as magnificent as Valhall. Thor also has his. He lives in Trudvang or Trudheim, which means something along with the strong world. And the big hall is called Bilskirnir, absolutely big enough to measure itself with Valhall. Every day, it is said, he walks across wild rivers to get to the god's thing, the meeting under the world tree Yggdrasil. In Trudvang, Thor lives with his wife Siv, a goddess that has hair made out of gold. As with most of the Aesir and Vanir gods, Thor isn't particularly faithful to Siv. He has a son named Mode, which means courage, and a daughter named Trud, which means strength. But he also have children with other women, among them a giantess called Järnsaxa. With her he has the son Magne, that also means strength. All his children have names that points towards Thor's own powers. Siv, by the way, might not be so faithful to Thor either.
she has a son, Ull, and Thor is said to be a stepfather to him. Hence, he is not the real father of Ull. Other important characters around Thor are his servants, Skjalve and Röskva, that both follows him on his many travels. To go back into where Thor might have come from as a god, we can find several similarities between him and the Roman god Jupiter. They are both sky gods, but some researchers point towards that Thor actually bears more resemblance to characters as Hercules. There has also been a comparison between Thor and the god Indra. And here we see a lot of similarities. Indra and Thor share the red hair, the strength, and the magical weapon, but also the temper and the ability to eat enormous amount of food. So we can clearly see that all of these gods probably stem from the same roots and have developed side by side in different regions, but kept a lot of similar traits. While Indra is a warrior god, Thor is not. He fights the giants and trolls from Jotunheim. He is a fierce warrior, but he is not a straight-up warrior god. He is not someone that was likely to ask for help before a battle, since he is not particularly strategic and instead very often let his rage put him in trouble. His temper and almost over-manliness are actually sometimes mocked a bit in the stories and portrayed as something that might not have been such a good trait. These stories can almost be read as cautionary tales. Don't let your temper run away with you, it will put you in trouble. And the god that has the biggest responsibility to keep the order and keep the world safe sometimes risk it because of his anger, and he's eager to prove himself, his temper running hot. One of the best stories here to use as an example are when Thor goes on a fishing trip with the giant Hymer. The story is mentioned in a lot of different texts and poems and is also illustrated on runestones, both the Altuna stone in Sweden, Hordum stone in Denmark and Gosforth in England. Because of the amount of different representation of these stories, we can safely say that it has been a widespread story over most of the Scandinavian world, and also spread with the Vikings to places such as England, Scotland and Ireland. The story tells of how Thor leaves Midgard for one of his journeys and ends up at the home of Hymer, a huge giant. Hymer is preparing for a fishing trip, and Thor asks to join, which the giant is a bit hesitant of, because Thor has taken the shape of a young man, and Hymer can't see what good this youngling would do on a fishing trip. He let him come along, though, after all, but tells Thor that he has to find his own bait. Thor then draws the head of one of Hymer's bulls. After they have started to row out, Hymer starts to realize that this young man is not what he seems, and Hymer wants to stop at his usual fishing place, but Thor takes the boat out farther and farther. So far out that Hymer starts to protest, because it is dangerously close to where the Midgard serpent is resting. Thor doesn't listen, and when he finally is far enough, his huge hook with the ox hand lands just in front of the Midgard serpent that, of course, takes the bite. Thor and the Midgard serpent fights so hard that Thor's feet goes through the boat and he stands on the ocean floor, and he is hell-bent on killing the serpent that he now have gotten all the way up to the surface. Hymer, scared to death over this, reaches out and cuts the line so the serpent gets away. Thor gets furious and throws the hammer after the serpent and gives Hymer such a strike over the ear with his own hand that Hymer falls into the water, and then Thor walks back onto dry land. This story is very entertaining. It does show Thor's enormous strength, but also let the god make somewhat a fool out of himself. It is a story about the greatest of cosmic powers, the serpent and the god fighting each other, and at the same time told as a sort of over-exaggerated fishing story. It is also a story that kind of put the world's order upside down, where the god is doing wrong and his enemy is doing right. In the story, Thor is actually risking the whole world because he is too stubborn and too eager to prove his strength in front of Hymer. If he would have killed the Midgard serpent, Ragnarök would be around the corner, because that is something that is foretold by the seer and Völva in other poems. Hymer actually, in that sense, is the real hero here, because he managed to save the world by cutting off the rope. Thor is portrayed as a pretty comical character, stomping away from the scene in anger and without manage to kill his greatest enemy. Western modern people are usually not used to these kind of stories, where the holy and godly is mocked and laughed at. But this goes well together with the kind of religion that the Old Norse is, where the gods' powers are limited and the gods does not always do the right thing. Many of the other stories has, as already mentioned, Loki as a companion for Thor on his travels. It is interesting because Loki and Thor are in many ways the opposite of each other. While Thor is so manly it is sometimes mocked by some of the storytellers, Loki is more androgynous and doesn't shy away from dressing up as a female or do trickery behind people's back. Loki is often the one that puts them in danger because he is mostly interested in saving his own hide, like in the story of the giant Geirröd, where he saves his own life by making a promise to bring Thor to the giant without his hammer. This story is solved by the fact that the female giant, Grid, was fond of Thor and gave him magical items like a belt, gloves and a stave. In other story, Loki steals Thor's wife's hair and has to replace it with a magical golden hair, or Thor would kill him with his bare hands. This is also the story about how Thor actually gets his magical hammer, because Loki is smart and cunning and managed to not only get the golden hair for Siv, but also all kinds of other magical gifts for the rest of the gods. So Loki and Thor might be fighting now and then. Usually Thor is accusing Loki for causing trouble and threatening to kill him, but they seem to be good friends and enjoy each other's company most of the time. Thor's mocked hyper-manliness and temper and his shown friendship with Loki shows for me yet another example of the morale that it was important to be either man or woman in the Viking Age, but you should not overdo it. And it also shows that it was okay to be different and that you could be friends despite your differences. Loki and Thor are after all friends in the end, and it isn't until Loki by trickery managed to kill Balder, Thor's beloved brother, that Thor actually for real turns against Loki. Thor's popularity in the sagas and poems, and the sometimes humorous stories around him, can also be because Thor was the farmer's god. He is important for the farmer, because rain is important, and you need protection against him at the same time because you do not want him to hunt for giants too close to your house so the flash strike down and put your farm on fire. He didn't bring much to the table for the leaders and the jarls though. As mentioned, he is not a strategic skilled person, he is brute force. Odin is much more a god for the leaders with his cunning and strategic ways, his Valkyries and his knowledge. And we do not often see the same simple humor around him as we see around Thor. Maybe the poets and the skalds in the great halls of the jarls and the kings mocked the farmers a bit by mocking Thor, and at the same time pointing towards how important that brute strength and stubbornness that farmers have is needed. Because that's also why the stories actually was liked by the farmers and so on spread among the people. The stories of Thor and Loki's travels are all very entertaining, and maybe I should make a special video just telling them as they really were written down in the Eddas. For now though, I think I have talked enough about Thor, the hot-headed redhead god of thunder and lightning and the keeper of the world's order. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and that bell icon might be good because my posting is extremely random and I sometimes post 2 videos in a week and sometimes it goes over a month before I manage to post anything. I'm so sorry about that. But know that I enjoy your comments and knowledge from your side too, so leave a comment about this video. It makes me happy and also helps the algorithm to make others find me. Until next time, have a splendid summer and never be afraid of the thunder. It is just Thor out hunting for trolls and giants, keeping the order of the world.